Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to take a minute first to thank the AEMP Shift team for putting together what I think has been a great event, and we're very proud to be sponsors of this event, so thank you for being here. My name is Dan Middleton. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Equipment Share, and I'm just going to take a minute of your time, and then I'm going to have the privilege of introducing our final speaker of this conference. So I'm very happy to be able to do that. So imagine, if you will, most of your equipment operators, owners, renters in this audience, in an environment where everything you own, independent of manufacturer or rent, independent of type of equipment, whether it's skid steers, scissor lifts, whether it's buckets, whether it's small tools, whether it's pickup trucks, all that's interconnected and cross-connected to each other. So you as an owner and operator have one contractor's perspective of your assets on a job site or assets across job sites. So you know if you have 500 pieces of equipment, what it's doing, where it is, how it's performing, what its maintenance looks like, all the details around that fleet. That allows a productivity and efficiency to be driven across your fleet and then deliver better projects and lower cost, and you can drive those savings to your customers. So it's all about making our end customer happy and proud about the project we put forward. So Equipment Share is driving that vision and that reality in the market today. So we're a construction technology company. But we are driving different areas of the business. We're bringing to bear a new and creative way, a smarter way to rent equipment, a smarter way to purchase equipment, ways to monetize those purchases, as well as operate and maintain those fleets. All of that's interconnected with what we're calling the construction Internet of Things, so construction IoT. So it's really designed to address productivity. So many industries across other industries have all used technology, IoT, AI, et cetera, to become smarter, better, more productive. We're kind of getting there, but we've got to have a little push. So take manufacturing. They've driven about $1.6 trillion of benefit over the last 10 years through the use of automation, technology, and IoT within the factory. There's a lot like a job site, just has walls. And then you have smart cities, smart grids, smart infrastructure for cities that allow them to communicate more effectively, everything from street lights, traffic lighting, and into your home and energy. That's changed the way people operate their lives. And the automobile industry is going through the biggest change of them all right now with autonomy and unmanned cars. And that kind of means for us, for me, we're next. The construction industry is next. We're going to take advantage of this technology. Equipment Share is bringing that to market, and we want to work with all of you to figure out how we can modify your infrastructures and give you the visibility you need. And on that note, I would like very much to introduce, Mr. Barrie Kirk. He's a CAVCOE out of Canada, former British citizen, and we actually crossed paths back in an old company, Nortel Networks, many years ago. So I'm very proud. He's a recognized authority in autonomous technologies and vehicles, and now he's going to apply that into the construction and heavy equipment space. And with that, please welcome Mr. Barrie Kirk.
Well, thank you, Dan, and good morning, everybody. And thank you also to AEMP for the invitation to be here and to speak with you today. And I just tell you, Rachel, this is a little bit unusual. Normally I come in and do a presentation and leave, but I've been here since late on Tuesday, so I had a chance to meet some of you and have some wonderful conversations and to listen to some of the other presentations, so I feel I know more about what you guys do than most audiences. Also, just for timekeeping purposes, I'm going to be speaking the presentation about 75 minutes, and then I'm planning 15 minutes Q&A. I'm not in a big rush to leave. My flight is until 3:45, so I can linger and chat, but certainly we'll finish. You can read it from the back, or if you can't, I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't drive you there. This is a takeoff from that wonderful sci-fi movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, where Hal, the computer, gets too big for his britches and takes over. Where were you when I needed to go to the store last night? And this, by the way, besides being a cartoon, illustrates the difference between automated vehicles and autonomous. Most people use the words interchangeably, but if you really get picky about your words, an autonomous vehicle is one that does what it wants to do, like the one in the cartoon. An automated vehicle does what you, the owner, want it to do. Big difference. Just a couple of quick slides about CAVCOE. We're a consulting company. We've got people spread out across Canada. We do studies for clients. We focus, although I'm an engineer, and as Dan was saying, my background is with Nortel and other companies, we focus on the implementation of autonomous vehicles. We help companies adjust their business plans. We work with governments to adjust government regulations and policy at all levels of government. And also, we get very involved in the socio-economic aspects. And I also do advocate, in the bottom right there, that's an opinion piece I wrote and was in fact published in the Ottawa Citizen this year, grumbling about the City of Ottawa's strategy on the light rail system. I do quite a bit of media work, and the one interview that went viral and became my most notorious is about 2 years ago. I did an interview and I threw in one line that when computers are doing the driving, there'll be a lot more sex in cars. And Terry Pedwell, who interviewed me, he knew a good thing when he saw it. And he ignored 19 and a half minutes of the interview and built a whole article about that one line. And that went viral in many different countries, and I had a lot of secondary interviews with radio and TV stations here in the US and elsewhere. And a little bit of trivia. If you look at the Google box there, if you Google my name, sex, and cars, you'll get over 1.3 million results. The whole idea of self-driving cars. Dave, could you start the timer, please? The whole idea of self-driving cars is not new. Nikola Tesla was a wonderful engineer, innovator, and in 1898, 121 years ago, he wrote a letter proposing vehicles that had, quote, enough judgment to be able to drive themselves. And Tesla, and by the way, if you don't know, Tesla has nothing to do with the Tesla cars except Elon Musk named them in honor of Nikola. Tesla was so brilliant, so innovative. People in his time really thought he'd been born on Venus and then came to Earth disguised as a human. And the vision he had was so wonderful because it was still 9 years before Henry Ford started mass producing the Model Ts. It's 80 years before IBM launched the first personal computer. So there's no way Tesla or anybody else even come close to implementing the vision. But he had that vision. And a little bit later on, in 1926, Tesla wrote about his vision of a device that would fit into a jacket pocket and would allow people to talk to anybody around the world and to see them. So in 1926, Tesla had a vision of a smartphone, way ahead of his time. This is New York City, 1900, Fifth Avenue. All the vehicles there are obviously horses and carriages. Mere 13 years later, a transportation revolution had taken place. Cars everywhere, except if you look on the far left-hand side, there's one horse and carriage, sort of hidden among the cars. It's amazing how quickly the technology changed. We think technology moves quickly today, but it did then as well. Just a semi-legal disclaimer. In my presentation, I'm going to show you a lot of different photos of different kinds of autonomous vehicles. Like the previous speaker said, I'm not endorsing anyone. I'm just using these to illustrate trends and what is happening today. But obviously I cannot, in this presentation, include all of them, so to the suppliers I don't mention, my apologies, but that's, I'm not endorsing anybody. Today's agenda, I want to start by talking about the status. CAV is connected and autonomous vehicles. I'll be talking about cars. I'll be talking about a range of other kinds of CAVs. I want to talk about the big picture, the socio-economic impact, which will be huge. I want to talk about business planning for the CAV era, because it is definitely 100% guaranteed going to affect each and every one of your businesses. I want to talk about the workforce of the future and how it will change. I want to provide a roadmap for organizations which will be relevant to all of you and your organizations. And then finally, I'm going to have one slide to sum up all that I'm going to tell you. Welcome to the CAV era. It started. And it's going to be a very exciting journey for the next 20 years, and for some people, rather scary. And when I say it started, there are niche markets that have already started using self-driving vehicles. And when I talk about vehicles, I think about the big picture. Cars, small trucks, big trucks, non-passenger autonomous vehicles, and so on. This particular one you see here is a small fleet that has been running in Civaux in France for 2.5 years, in everyday commercial operation. It's low speed, fully autonomous and electric. And it's used in a nuclear power facility inside the barbed wire, and it takes people, the workers, from the parking lot to the buildings. It's a 2.4 kilometer, 1.5 mile route, and it does that for about 18 hours a day. Then overnight, they just plug it into the reactor to charge the batteries. I'm joking, they don't. But there's two different French companies involved. One is Easy Mile, who make that vehicle, and the other is Transdev, that are the transit operator. Another company is Origo, based in the UK, in Coventry, and they have been demonstrating small four-seater pods like this one. They've been demonstrating them in the US here, in Canada, obviously in the UK, and Australia and other places. And it's also being demonstrated this week at a big transportation conference in Singapore. And I'll come back to that site. Ford, in fact, all of the OEMs, the car manufacturers, all the OEMs are involved in self-driving vehicles, one way or the other. Ford is one of them. You see those antennas on the top, those are slowly going to disappear. Eventually, the vision is everything, all the sensors will be built into the bodywork, so you won't be able to see from the outside whether the car is computer-driven or human-driven, unless you actually look inside. Ford has announced, and this is from their website, Ford has announced that they're going to start selling and have in operation fully autonomous cars by 2021. That's just over 2 years away. That's a lot sooner than people expect. Ford, GM, and others are tightly focused on the initial deployment will be driverless taxis in urban areas that have been well mapped, high definition mapping. These will not be cars that you can go out and buy as an individual. That's still a few more years away. There's a very clear market trend towards focusing initially on driverless taxis. Waymo, of course, part of AlphaNet, their sister company, Waymo's sister company is Google, that you all know. They are very invested in this, and many others. GM has announced that they will be offering driverless cars in 2022. And this is, in fact, is an image developed by GM. No steering wheel, no pedals. There are a couple, at least, of challenges. One is the technology. We're not completely there. The other challenge is getting this type approved by the different government regulatory authorities. Let me give you one example. For cars sold in the US, in Canada, there's a regulation that you have to have an airbag built into the steering wheel. But if you don't have a steering wheel, that regulation is kind of nonsense. So what GM has said to the NHTSA, that they want to have the regulation changed and put in the same kind and location of airbags on the left-hand front seat as they now have on the right-hand front seat. It's amazing how slow governments are. GM filed for that and other changes, and it took them, the federal government, about a year, and then they went out for public comment. Why it took them a year to decide to get public comment, I'm not sure, but the regulatory changes are necessary, essential, and they take time. This is a concept car by Mercedes-Benz. If you don't have a human driver, you can change the inside and do this. This vision, in fact, includes a steering wheel. If you look on the far right-hand side, there is a steering wheel. So this is dual mode. You can, in fact, have it in a purely autonomous mode. But if you really want to have some fun, you can swivel the front seat and drive it the old-fashioned way, which some people will want to do. In terms of timing, there's phases. Nobody is going to throw one big switch and we suddenly enter the era of self-driving vehicles. It'll be gradual. I mentioned a few minutes ago it started. It's going to ramp up over the 2020s and the 2030s. So what we have now are these low-hanging fruit, the shuttle buses I showed you earlier. Certainly in the mining industry, and I know from Alberta, so they already use fully autonomous vehicles in the oil patch there, made by Komatsu. There's also commercially available what's called in the business ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, intelligent cruise control, lane keeping, and so on. And that's partway there, but not all the way yet. It's a start. Starting with Ford in 2021, we're going to have the first street legal, fully autonomous vehicles. But these will be limited deployment, downtown areas that have been subjected to high definition mapping, and there will be a limited number of vehicles on the road as they are developed and we build up the capability. Through the 2020s, we are going to see a ramp up in the capability in the number of vehicles being deployed. And in the transportation industry, I don't know whether you use it, there's a thing called a VMT, vehicle miles traveled. And we'll see over the 2020s a very significant ramp up in the VMTs by CAVs. It will not be until the 2030s that we see the ultimate. Okay? In the CAV ecosystem, they talk about levels. I won't bore you with all the levels, but a level 5 is the ultimate. A level 5 is go anywhere, anytime, in almost any weather. And that will take some time. The difference is, the ones I'm talking about for the 2020s will be in a downtown area. But by 2030, the sensors and artificial intelligence will be so advanced that you don't need advanced mapping, high definition mapping, that the vehicles can see and drive themselves as well as, and in all likelihood, better than humans. So you take a trailer, go to a campground, and you can in fact then have the car navigate itself through the trailers and tents and so on and kids and park itself, which will not be possible until the 2030s. I mentioned that we are not really there yet in terms of all the technology. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'm going to just mention a few highlights in terms of the ongoing technical challenges. Cybersecurity, that's a biggie. There's a lot of publicity about it. Everybody knows the issues. Everybody, well, you've got the OEMs are working on it. You've got specialized companies like BlackBerry, QNX are working on it, and others. The reality is we are facing an arms race. Nobody will ever completely overcome the cybersecurity issue. The bad guys have a lot of expertise and a lot of money. And they're going to do their best to create disruption and mayhem. The good guys, the OEMs and their suppliers, are going to try and overcome that. And it will be an arms race. They'll be jumping over each other with advances in both protecting vehicles and people and trying to create that mayhem. So we have to be prepared for the fact that there's no single solution. Hand gestures, and I don't mean the rude variety, but where I live, just outside of Ottawa, on the way home, it's a four-way stop sign. And if I turn left, and if there's a car coming towards me, who has the right of way, I'll just do that, and the other person waves and comes straight on, then I turn left and all is safe. Computers at the moment and sensors are not very good at looking through a windshield and interpreting that. But they're working on it. Again, these are all known issues. Insurance is a biggie, and I get asked a lot of questions about who's liable. And the car companies are in fact taking the initiative. People like Tesla, Mercedes and others have already announced that when they start selling self-driving cars, they're going to bundle in life insurance for the, not life insurance, liability insurance for the life of the car. So they are so confident, but it's also being realistic, because if they are selling cars with software for driving, they're going to be liable anyway, so they may as well make a virtue out of necessity. Traffic signals and police officers. They're still working on, if you've got malfunctioning traffic signals and you've got a police officer in charge, then everywhere you drive, the police officer signals take priority. But they're still trying to train cars to differentiate between malfunctioning traffic signals and a police officer. When I look at the overall CAV ecosystem, I see a basic set of technologies, and in marketing terms, this is the horizontal market, and the sensors, the computers, the artificial intelligence, the electric drivetrain systems. They vary in size and capability, but they are common to most kinds of self-driving vehicles. But then you have a whole bunch of different vertical markets. Non-passenger vehicles for service applications, passenger cars, small buses, big buses, equipment used for construction, mining, and so on, forestry. And also drones. There's a lot of sharing of technology with the drone sector. So I just want to spend a few slides here talking about some of the other kinds of use cases, the other verticals, as they're called. Construction, we heard yesterday from Volvo. Agriculture, a lot of work going on in the agriculture segment. Garbage collection. The Dutch have a very interesting project, it's a trial, and the Dutch have adapted a garbage collection vehicle to be autonomous. You still need, in the Dutch pilot, you still need a human being to empty the garbage cans into the truck. But the technology is that the guy, and it normally is a guy, walks down the sidewalk, and the garbage truck follows him like a big puppy. So he doesn't have to keep getting into the vehicle to drive it a few feet and then get out. It's autonomous, but in a follow me mode. And a few other things I want to mention. This is probably, you've seen similar pictures earlier in this conference. One of the key companies here is Komatsu. Suncor in the Alberta oil sands have bought 150 autonomous vehicles. The one on the left is the older version, you may be more familiar with. About 2 years ago now, Komatsu announced a fully autonomous version. You see on the right, there's no cab. It's not designed to be driven by a human. It's got steering on all four wheels, and that vehicle was designed from the ground up to be autonomous. Komatsu has a vision that goes to the very heart of what you guys do. Their plan is to have a complete mind, and they published this, so this is no secret. They published their vision, a mind running on artificial intelligence, robotics, and autonomous vehicles. And they, in fact, would load the plans for that operation into their computers. If you download it through the equipment, and the whole mind would operate autonomously without a single human in sight. They're obviously a number of years away from that vision, but that's their vision, and that's the future. And some of these autonomous machines are already being used or in pilot mode. This autonomous wheel loader. Robo Industries have this. DOT technology is based just outside of Regina in Saskatchewan. Disclosure, they're a client of ours. But they have re-envisaged agriculture. And the vehicle on the left is a completely self-contained vehicle platform for agriculture. You've got on the left, the white thing there is the engine and the control system. You've got 4 wheels that rotate 360 degrees. And you then have a number of different payloads for seeding, weed killer, harvesting, whatever. And that platform will pick up different payloads for whatever you want to do that day. And you see on the right a combination of a payload and that platform. And the vision that DOT have, this is all public, I'm not giving away any secrets. The vision is to have a machine you can program before breakfast. The farmer can go off and do whatever you require in the field, number one. It can then go on the road to another field and keep on working all by itself. And this machine here, you see on the right, those arms come up for road travel. The wheels rotate so that on the farm, on the field, you have the arms down, you have the full width, and then for road use, the arms come up, it turns sideways and goes down the road without being too much of a block for traffic. And that vehicle is now being marketed in different parts of North America. Mercedes-Benz is one of the companies very involved in autonomous trucking. And you can see there, this is often a mock-up, but the driver's reading an e-book while he's driving along. Volvo is also very involved in a cabless electric truck. You like that one? And sometimes when I speak, I've had a union official stand up and said, you'll always need a truck driver. And I say, no, look at this. It's called Vera, and a bit of trivia, Vera is a legendary Nordic goddess, right? And so they call this Vera. At the moment, this has about a 300-kilometer range. They're testing it The initial use case will be factories and logistics handling facilities like mine sites. Later on, they're going to expand the capability. And by the way, this is a real photo. It's not a computer-generated thing. And this vehicle is being tested. And there's, in fact, on YouTube, there are videos of this actually being demonstrated and tested. So, clearly, for this, you'll never, ever need a driver. Coming down in size, there's a whole bunch of small sidewalk-friendly robots. This is one. Pizza delivery is a typical use case. Fetching groceries, having one of these take groceries from your local store to your home. It's a Starship, real live demonstrations. And there's a lot of applications for this. Mercedes-Benz has also been working with the same company, Starship, on this combination. The vision is a fully autonomous van with little guys get out and do the last 100 yards delivery. The issue with the small guys is got small batteries, they don't really have a big range. So the vision that Mercedes-Benz has is to have a van like this that goes to a neighborhood, and the little guys come out, deliver the last 100 yards or so to homes and offices, and they pop back in and go to another neighborhood. Ford is going one step further. They, in fact, are looking at a robot that delivers parcels to homes and offices. A real-life demonstration, and robot technology is really coming a long way. So you've got a Ford autonomous van with a person inside, a robot. And one of our projects, interesting project about a year ago, was with the City of Toronto. And they asked us to hold workshops and study how the City of Toronto could develop the regulations for robots like this. And one of the interesting questions is, rather than using a van, should robots like this be allowed to ride on the Toronto transit system? How would you feel about sitting down and having one of these things sit down beside you? I mean, it's a real life question. Boston Dynamics, obviously based in Boston, they got a whole bunch of YouTube videos. These robots are doing more and more work. This is a video, taken from a video of a robot installing drywall. And there's also a wonderful video of one of these robots doing acrobatics, doing backflips, and even doing a jump and 360, which I can't do. But for fun, if you've got a few minutes, look at Boston Dynamics and some of their robotic videos. But the future is more and more things will be done by robots. UPS has been involved in its own trial using drones. So this again is a combination of a UPS van that drives to a neighborhood autonomously in the future. The roof slides open, then a drone lifts up and delivers a parcel to a home or business. And even if the van moves to a different neighborhood, the drone can track and automatically return to the mothership. It's still only a trial, but it shows what the technology is already capable of. The Jetsons are coming very, very soon. Does everybody remember the Jetsons? Yeah, too young, Mike.
No.
There's about 10 or a dozen different major companies around the world developing electric personal airborne transportation. That's one of the buzzwords. And this week, actually, at the big transportation conference I mentioned in Singapore, there's a bunch of these are being demonstrated with flights over the water for safety. This is Airbus, and both Airbus and Boeing are both very active, and also a bunch of startups. These are designed to be fully autonomous in the future, you will not have a pilot, just passengers. And you thought self-driving cars were scary. And they're electric, so they'll go from city centre to city centre. Each of those propellers will have its own electric motor. So if you lose an engine, you've still got lots of backup. The wings tilt, so for takeoff and landing, it functions like a helicopter. And then once it's up in the air, it rotates and goes forward, and it's far more efficient that way. This is a Boeing version. It's a bit clunky, and I've got some new photos now from the Singapore conference, and I want to change that because the technology has come a long way since January of this year, and they look a lot better. But they are actually flying in a test mode. Uber is really invested in this, and their vision is to repurpose downtown parking garages, convert the top deck to a heliport. So if you want to go somewhere, you in fact then go to the parking garage, park your car, go upstairs, and take one of these flying taxis to another city. Well, let me just go back there if I can. Uber has already announced it's going to start a commercial service in 2022, in 3 years. And the first services will be Dallas-Fort Worth. There's also one in Florida, and a third one in Australia. So we're getting really close. It's interesting to me that these services will in fact start at about the same time as ground CAVs. Coming back down to earth, there's going to be the biggest single benefit of CAVs is that they're going to be much safer. AVs, there's a study done here in the US that shows that 93% of collisions involve human error. That study is often misquoted, and I've read this. Some people don't really read it and say 93% of collisions are caused by humans. It's more nuanced. Humans are involved. I believe, and I've said this many times, that with full deployment, which is still a bunch of years away, we can reduce the number of collisions from where we are now. Here in the US, it's about 38,000 deaths a year. We can reduce it down to 20%. And that's going to be important, because that means from 38,000 deaths a year, we'll be down to 7,500 or so. Huge improvement. I promised yesterday I would call out Volvo, and Volvo has run this advertisement about a crash-proof car. Vision Zero has the same kind of vision. Even the US government has talked about a future with no collisions and no deaths. And I say those are wonderful objectives. I support them, but it's a pure fantasy. I'm an engineer. I know that all hardware, all software fails occasionally, and I protest as much as I can against misleading the public into thinking that technology will be perfect. We need to be realistic. We need to all of us, better manage the expectations. That US study I mentioned, 7% of the collisions and deaths at the moment would happen irrespective of whether a human or a computer is doing driving, and probably more, which is why I'm saying we can hopefully get rid of 80%, but never bring the deaths down to zero. Bottom line is that there will be collisions, fatalities, injuries, sadly, but far, far fewer than we have today. This slide is the most controversial I ever use. I get a lot of pushback, and let's fast forward to 2030. Let's suppose data is in, and it shows that computers really are safer and better drivers than silly, stupid humans. Then I think we in both countries, at the state and provincial level, need to have a conversation about whether we ban human drivers completely. Is it ethical to allow humans to keep on driving and causing all that mayhem on the roads when there's a better technology alternative? Not perfect, but much better. It's interesting when I talk to people, young people, millennials, get it. And they're already moving away from getting driving licenses, moving away from vehicle ownership. Seniors and the handicapped understand this, and they look forward to the potential for more mobility in their senior years than they would otherwise have. What I'm going to say is sexist, I admit that. The most pushback I get from people with this slide is from middle-aged males who, in fact, love to drive and would hate to give up the driving license or be forced to. When I talk about self-driving cars, there's really three separate technologies that are converging and have converged in some ways. Autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles, and electric vehicles. And I often talk about ACE vehicles for that reason. It's far more inclusive. The other fourth trend is not really technology, it's parking technology, it's sharing, the whole sharing economy. We're going to see ACEs, we're going to see driverless taxis, and this is going to cause a lot of changes to your lives over the next 5, 10, 20 years. It's a thing called mobility as a service, transportation as a service, microtransit. We're going to see, through the 2020s and beyond, an increasing use of fully autonomous self-driving taxis. The downside for some people is fewer people will actually own their own car. Rather than buying cars, more and more people will buy rides. So you use your smartphone, you call up a ride like you do now for an Uber, except when the Uber or whatever arrives, it'll be a driverless vehicle. And 50% of an Uber ride goes to the driver. So if in fact you can save the cost of a driver, then the baseline cost of the ride goes down by half. I'm sure Uber will save a bit more for themselves, but there will be a big reduction in costs. And it also means that those transportation industries are going to be disruptive. Taxis, ride-sharing, car rental, they're all going to, in fact, converge into these driverless taxis. I like the term microtransit. There's also, I mentioned improvements in mobility for seniors and people with handicaps. And that is starting to get more attention. ITS America, Intelligent Transportation Systems of America, earlier this year, they published a very good report, really doing a scan of what's there now and what the potential is. And again, I'm a bit biased. I helped with that report. I attended a couple of workshops in Washington. There's a lot of stuff happening there, but a lot more stuff needs to happen. But it's one of the other really big benefits of driverless taxis. Staying with the whole theme of socio-economic, there's going to be a need for a lot fewer parking garages and parking lots. If I'm right, and if others are right, and we see a lot more driverless taxis, then when they drop you off, they don't need to park. They'll just go off and find other customers. And if they do need to park, it'll be a lot cheaper to have parking garages or parking lots outside the urban center, where they can go get themselves recharged, cleaned, and so the number of parking garages downtown will be severely reduced. And I've spoken to parking associations on a number of occasions, and I've told them that starting in the early 2020s, their business model will be disrupted because be fewer need for parking garages, with the exception of the ones that Uber uses for a heliport. There's also another thing called dynamic parking. I was a confession. I love my Starbucks. So if I'm in a downtown area and I want Starbucks, rather than park my car, I could tell it to stop. I would get out and tell my car to circle the block a few times till I have my Starbucks. Then I'll get out and tell it to pick me up. There will be opportunities for parking, cleaning, charging, but not so much in the auto sector. What's interesting is Ford and GM are singing from the same song sheet. Mary Barra of GM, the CEO, has said the auto sector will change more in the next 5 to 10 years than it has in the last 50. And she's also said, and I agree with her, ride-sharing network is the logical first place to start with driverless technology. Ford saying basically the same thing. Their plan is to grow quickly to be part of the transportation services sector. And Ford has said again in public that their forecast is selling rides will bring in twice as much money each year as selling vehicles. Business plan. Just got a drink here. When I look at the CAV market in general, and especially the sort of businesses that you folks are in, why would you go that route? Some of it is pretty obvious. Reduce labor costs. And that's very important. I was involved in a radio program a while back in Canada, and it was after Suncor announced that they were going to buy 150 driverless heavy haulers. And CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC sneakily paired me up online in real time with a union official representing drivers at Suncor. And what came out was interesting, that even though Suncor was going to be buying 150 heavy haulers, the union official said about 800 jobs are threatened, because these heavy haulers are in use best part of 24 hours a day. You've got maintenance involved, and so there's a multiplier effect, huge job loss, and it was an interesting on-air discussion. Suncor and others have done a lot of work to analyze the business case here. One of the things they've discovered is that computers really are better drivers than humans. They're gentler on the machines. And Suncor has learned that they can stretch out the maintenance intervals because there's less wear and tear from the computer driver. Same thing with the tires. You know better than I do. Those big tires are worth, what, $100,000 more, because the computers doing the driving are gentler. Those tires last longer. And you also have reduced fuel cost. There's one wonderful example, Volvo was talking yesterday about mining operation. There's one mine, I think somewhere in South America, where they in fact have haulers that take ore from the top of the mountain down to a railroad in the valley. It's an electric heavy hauler, and when it goes downhill to the railway, it's fully loaded, so they use regenerative braking to in fact slow it down and charge the batteries. When it goes uphill, it's empty and uses less electricity. So at the end of the day, that vehicle has generated more energy than it uses. Wonderful business case. And again, with regenerative braking, it's safe on great life. So all those things combined together create a pretty good business case. Komatsu has also listed some of these other benefits. I won't go through all of these, some of these may be self-evident to you, but with computers doing driving, you can take better and more centralized control of the vehicles. You don't have a risk from drowsy or unskilled drivers. Precision placement of dumped loads. And the two bottom bullets, I think, are very useful. The load and haul total unit costs for AHS users reduced by about up to 15%, and a 13% reduction in total maintenance costs for the kind of reasons I mentioned just now. So clearly in this sector and this vertical, there's a very strong business case, and this is why we're seeing this progress. And one thing I'm going to disagree with, and Dan isn't here, so I'm going to disagree with him. Dan, during the introduction, said that given the fact that the cars are going autonomous, he then said, and then your industry will go autonomous. And I disagree that he's got it backwards. It's a lot easier to have autonomous vehicles off-road, mining sites, forestry, agriculture, and so on. And that CAV has a lot of sensors. It has LiDAR, short-range radar, long-range radar, vision cameras and processing. And they, each day, each vehicle will gather terabytes of information. And that is worth a lot. According to which OEM you talk to, I've spoken with, the estimate is that the value of the data collected by CAVs, when it's monetized, is between 3 and 10 times the value of the car itself. That's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And it also explains to me why Google is so heavily invested in self-driving technology. It's not transportation, it's the data. If Google's sensors know a lot of information about the people in the vehicle, and it's not only that, it's also the people on the sidewalk, and facial recognition has come a long way in the last few years. So if I'm driving down a street here, and one of the cameras on my CAV happens to see Michael walking into a chocolate shop, then by the time she gets home and checks Facebook, she'll start receiving advertisements on Facebook about chocolate. And that's the way it's going to work. That's why Google's invested. They have a platform, a global platform, to take that data, use it for advertising, and monetize it. And that's a huge amount of money. The two big issues: who owns the data? And there's two things here. One is the data about the people in the vehicle, but also the data that's being picked up from everybody else on the sidewalks. And that's the ownership and the privacy issues are really big. I don't know whether you folks have had any visibility into Sidewalk Labs. Sidewalk Labs is an arm of Alphabet. It's a sister company to Google and Waymo. And Sidewalk Labs has the right to develop a chunk of land in downtown Toronto. And they're a vision for a fully smart, a smart city basically, a smart community. And they published that. What Sidewalk Labs was not expecting is a lot of pushback from the public. People are concerned about if they're just walking down the sidewalk, like my example with Michael, they're walking down the sidewalk, being picked up on sensors in cars, sensors on lampposts. With facial recognition, they can figure out who you are and where you live, and figure out what you're doing. And the public pushed back in a big, big way. And Sidewalk Labs has spent year, 18 months now, trying to retrench, trying to gain the public's confidence. And it's a potentially a big project. All three levels of government in Canada, federal, province of Ontario, and the City of Toronto, they're all involved in this, as well as Sidewalk Labs. So the public is starting to get concerned, even more concerned, about privacy issues. And there have also been cases, I was reading a couple of years ago, but in Europe, some of the car companies in Europe, that even if they sell a car, they still get to own the data. So a lot of people like me would not want to buy a car outright and then lose control of the data from the sensors that I've just bought. So that's the kind of thing. And it's all made more complicated by different perceptions. There are people out there who feel all of this data should be freely available, open source, and used at no charge for the public good, which is a fantasy. Because somebody has to pay for the infrastructure and the processing to collect. The other end of the spectrum are the people who feel it should be driven by the private sector, and so that they own the data and can monetize it and make billions of dollars. And that's a fantasy, because they won't get away with it. We need somewhere in the middle between those two extremes, and that's where the discussions are going on, and people taking extreme positions are not really looking for a compromise. But that's an ongoing battle. Industries are going to be at risk. Anybody involved in transportation will see their industries affected. Bus drivers, obviously one, auto body repair. If cars really are a lot safer, then auto repair shops will see less business. Bus drivers. A while back, I gave a presentation to the Canadian Urban Transit Association, CAVCOE. When I finished, there's an earlier version of this presentation. When I finished, the first person to stand up self-described as, quote, the opposition. He was a union official for transit companies, for transit drivers, and he spoke for about a minute, very calmly, but very passionately about the human cost. Not only on the drivers themselves, but on their families, for losing their jobs. And he's right. When he sat down, I let him finish about a minute. When he sat down, I agree with him. I said, I hope governments can help with some sort of safety net, retraining, do whatever to minimize the human cost. Lawyers. I got an email a while back from a lawyer in Toronto. He has a legal practice that is dedicated to litigation related to traffic collisions. And he wrote to me cold and said, is it true that self-driving cars will be safer? And will that negatively impact my legal practice? And I wrote back and said, yes and yes. And I'm sure we can all shed a tear for litigation lawyers. One of the other big impacts is, especially for the electric vehicle side, is the oil and the pipeline industry. Compared to what's happening in Europe and in Asia, both countries are lagging. China, there's a wonderful article a while back in The Economist magazine. China wants to own the global EV business. They've got a lot of the rare earth minerals that are essential, and even if people buy up their cars, they want to sell to the rest of the world the essential subsystems for use in electric vehicles. One expert, and I'm no expert in this area, one expert said that the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles in China may have already peaked, which is a sobering thought. And as about 40% of the world's oil is used for transportation. And if you see the trend in China, India, Europe, We will be using a lot less oil for transportation in the future, which means the cost will go down. And in Canada, we just had an election on Monday. One of the big issues was pipelines, which affects your industry because somebody has to build the pipelines. But what I've said to people is I don't understand, well, I do understand, but politicians can't see beyond the next election. And when I talk to politicians when I have a chance, I point out that by 2030, the oil and pipeline industry, as we've known it for the last 100 years, will be on life support. By 2040, it's all over. So why should companies and governments spend billions of dollars on new pipelines to get oil to market? And by the time it's all finished, that market is diminishing and disappearing. What I do say, more constructively, is that different economies need to focus on the 21st century and not 20th century. And again, this advice I give to people affects what you guys do. I say to people that whenever a corporation, a city, or whatever goes and looks for financing for a major transportation infrastructure project, that the need for that, the design of that will change in the next 10, 20 years. And I will always recommend that they insist that the funders, the source of the financing, insist that there be an analysis of the impact of CAVs on the needs and design of that infrastructure. Too many of these transportation infrastructure projects are being designed and developed assuming we're still in the 20th century, and we're not. One of the big areas for all of us as well is government regulations. That's going to change, takes time, and one of the problems is governments in general are not very good at managing disruptive technologies. They're very slow, and there's a whole bunch of reasons. Governments work in silos. Governments generally have a culture of zero risk, and that means it takes time. The first commandment of CAVs, for me, is thou shalt have no special infrastructure. And I hear too many people saying, how about the infrastructure? And basically, if you have to wait and change all the infrastructure for every single mile of freeway, arterial, side roads, farm tracks across the country, we'll never get to CAVs. And nobody can afford that change anyway. The real approach is to, and what's happening, we're going to put all the intelligence and the sensors and the AI into the vehicles. So we can start off small in an urban area and then expand. That's the approach. The one exception to that is that there will be a need for digital infrastructure. Not physical, but digital. That's where a lot of money is going to be spent. And the main one is 5G, the next generation of cell phone technology. And a lot of things are happening all over the world in that area. The second commandment is, once you've got a certain penetration of CAVs in use, you can optimize the infrastructure. One example is the university, A&M University in Texas did a study a year or so ago, and they did some modeling. We all know circles, traffic circles, roundabouts, whatever. Generally speaking, humans don't like circles, roundabouts. I'm different. I mean, I'm from the UK, and I used to, when I was 5 years old, I used to ride my bike around a local roundabout. So, but a lot of people aren't comfortable. And the modeling they did shows that computers can use roundabouts far more efficiently than humans. So one of the possible trends in the future is once we have enough CAVs in use, we'll see a lot fewer traffic signals intersections and more mini European style roundabouts. But that will wait until we get enough CVs in use to make it worthwhile. I mentioned parking, fewer parking lots, fewer parking garages in the future. But what we will need is a lot more charging stations, because there's such a close relationship between CVs and electric vehicles. There's a wonderful guy called Tony Seba. He's with Stanford. He, about a year or so ago, he wrote a book, got a lot of publicity about the future. His views are very bullish. I often get criticism that I'm too bullish about the future. It'll take longer to play out. He's way out in front of me. But his views are interesting. I think the trends he's talking about are valid. To my taste, I'm not quite as aggressive as he is, but let me just go through some of these. He's saying by 2025, no more gas or diesel cars, buses, and trucks will be sold anywhere in the world. We're seeing a start of that, but the deadline for that is pushed further out. And he's saying by 2030, self-driving cars will shrink the new car market by 80%. And the concept of individual car ownership will be obsolete. The insurance industry will be disrupted, and he's right on that one. Warren Buffett, you've all heard of Warren Buffett, and among other things, he owns GEICO, and he has said self-driving cars are going to be wonderful for society, but really bad for the insurance industry. Tony is also talking about that people will switch en masse to self-driving electric vehicles, which will have, each vehicle will have an expected lifespan of about 1 million miles. Part of the reason for that is a typical car has today has about 2,000 moving parts. An electric car has about 20. So much longer life. Gasoline in the future will become obsolete. Up to 80% of parking spaces will be redundant for the reasons I mentioned earlier. He said it would be hard to find a gas station because gasoline will be obsolete. Dealers will disappear. I don't believe 2024, but the Tesla business model, they're moving away from dealers to direct sales. And if people are buying fewer cars, then the fleet operators would order straight from the factory. I mentioned one about banning human drivers, and Tony is saying that at some point in the future, there'll be a mass stranding of existing vehicles because you can't sell them, nobody wants them. The workforce of the future. The workforce is going to change. The technology sector will grow. The mobility service sector will grow. We'll see a lot of action in non-passenger AVs, which includes vehicles on work sites, and a lot of growth, obviously, in electricity generation and the distribution of power. It's a busy chart. It shows the auto sector in the future. This is specific to Ottawa, but a lot of cities in the US and Canada could develop similar charts. And it shows all the different ways in which the technology companies are taking over the auto sector. And what I like about this chart is the fact that in the Ottawa area, it's grouped about 80 different companies involved in the auto sector by category. One is connectivity in the bottom left. Top right, safety and security, software. Third one down on the right, sensors, very, very important. Manufacturing. Also a lot of work happening in universities. And I didn't create this chart, I'm also glad to see near the top left, CAVCOE is mentioned. But one of the realities, there's going to be a lot of job growth in the technology industry. We're going to see, job categories like transit drivers become less important, fewer of them. But I'm a realist. You cannot take a 50-year-old bus driver and retrain him or her to be a software developer. It doesn't work that way. So the kinds of people you need for new jobs are going to be different from ones who are going to be losing jobs. And that's a big challenge. There's going to be social unrest. I've said before, I come from the UK, and 200 years ago, have you all heard of Luddites? 200 years ago in the north of England, there's a very active cloth spinning industry. And somebody came up with a wonderful semi-autonomous spinning loom. And basically, two things happened. To operate the loom, you required a lower skill level, which meant people who operated the looms would be paid less. And secondly, you needed fewer people. A big disruption to the industry. And there's a guy called Nick Ludd, L-U-D-D. He and his people worked in the spinning industry, and they went around at night time physically smashing up these newfangled spinning looms. They were the original Luddites trying to push back on the approach of technology. It didn't work, but it shows the fact that there was then and will be again social unrest. And I don't see enough people prepared for that. I mentioned a lot of the other things happening there, job losses, and very significant. I mentioned my interview with CBC Radio about Suncor and that one. A while back, a year ago, Columbus, Ohio announced they was going to do a pilot of a driverless shuttle as part of its smart city project. And when the transit union heard about that, they went public. And they said if the city of Columbus, Ohio goes ahead, they're going to cause a transit strike. And that's not good news. I mean, politicians don't like transit strikes. So, but again, another example of social unrest. Job changes will happen. Vehicle technicians. At the moment, vehicle technicians need to be experts in internal combustion engines and hydraulic systems. In the future, they need to know about electric drivetrains, big batteries, calibrating sensors on vehicles, and lots of software. Plus, for quite a few years, there'll be legacy systems as well. And the colleges and universities, like colleges and institutes, are now starting to understand that they have to change their technician programs for the 2020s to train the technicians of the future. Other related job impacts, users will need less staff on site with everything, more and more stuff will be automated. And it affects the service departments. Job sites will need charging stations, and we heard that yesterday from Volvo. And a lot more communications. So my experience is that colleges are starting to understand. On Tuesday, 2 days ago, I was in Toronto, moderating a panel talking just about this. There's a college called Centennial, and they train vehicle maintenance technicians. In the springtime, I spoke at a conference of Colleges and Institutes Canada, big conference. And again, I spoke about the change of all of this, and there is going to be a lot of changes, and the colleges are starting to understand. There's going to be an impact on almost all government jobs. I won't go through all of these. Healthcare is one. It's well known that young adults between 18 and 30, for that demographic, traffic deaths traffic collisions are a leading cause of death. What's less well known is for young people in that 18 to 30 demographic, they're an important source for organ and tissue donations. Young adults who were healthy but die suddenly are very important for organ and tissue donations. One person could conceivably benefit up to 50 people. But if you save all those young lives, society benefits. If you save all those young lives, then older people who need a new liver or whatever will be out of luck. I'm talking about police. Does your car have any idea why my car pulled it over? Roadmap. I like talking about Alice in Wonderland. When Alice was walking through the woods, the park split, and Alice didn't know which way to go. Cheshire Cat appeared, and Alice said, should I take the left fork or the right fork? And Cheshire Cat says, it depends, where are you going? And Alice said, I don't know. And so the Cheshire Cat was very wise and said, if you don't know where you're going, it makes no difference whether you take the left or the right fork. And the moral of the story is, you need a vision of where you're going in the future to inform short-term decisions. What I do recommend for organizations is to plan for the future. Nobody has a perfect vision into the future, but it's an imperfect forecast of the next 10 or 20 years is going to be better and more accurate than assuming we're still in the 20th century, because we're not. I always advise people to be on the leading edge of disruption. And the companies and the governments I've worked with, the ones that do the best are the ones which involve senior management as soon as possible. One quick story. We now just finished our third project with the City of Toronto. When I started the first one with CAVCOE, watch the topic, for the first project, I thought the biggest city in Canada would have the most inertia. I was wrong, and I told them, I'm pleased I was wrong, because of the attitude of top management to encourage everybody to be open to new ideas, new technologies, and they realize, based on what the senior management says, that they have an opportunity to redesign and redefine the whole city of Toronto over the next 25 years. Involve your customers. Do presentations, workshops. Definitely look at your business plan, make the best forecast you can of the technology roadmap over the next 10, 20 years. It's interesting, the UK government has just issued a roadmap to get a lot of AVs on the roads in the UK by 2030. They've identified over 500 milestones. It's a wonderful report, and I wish more countries would do that. And keep your customers up to speed. It's a way to shine with your customers, to show that you are on the leading edge. Nobody has all the answers right away, but at least be open and keep your customers in the loop. A couple of resources for all of this. The free one is AV Update. It's a newsletter, it's a free newsletter that I republish, talking about the whole area of CAVs. 50% is typically Canadian news, the other 50% is from the US and around the world. It's free and keeps you up to speed. The other thing I wanted to mention is AED. The reason Rachel invited me here was because of a report that we did for AED. It was announced earlier this year. It looks at the impact of autonomy on the heavy equipment industry, the 4 sectors of interest to AED, construction, mining, forestry, and agriculture. So that report is free. It's online from AED, so if you want a deeper dive into what I've been talking about, that's another resource. Bottom line, I think what you've heard in the last hour or so, CAVs are going to change a lot of things over the next 5, 10, 20 years. They'll be very disruptive to our personal lives, to business, to government, society. And I liken this to 1908 all over again. And there will be a lot of changes that are of equal breadth and magnitude compared to the impact of to the impact of the original cars in the 20th century. I think by 2030, or the early 2030s, our cities, our lives will be very different. And if you think I'm being aggressive with that, think back to my 2 opening photos of Fifth Avenue in New York. We had a real transportation revolution over 13 years. And it happened once, it can happen again, I believe it will. And from now to, 13 years is 2032. So we're going to see a lot of changes there. And you know better than I do how much the heavy equipment industry has changed in the 20th century. Be prepared for the fact it's going to change every bit as much in this century as well. So it's going to be exciting. It's going to be scary for some people whose jobs are threatened. But I think the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages. And that's just a recap on follow-up information. So, not bad. 30 seconds to go. So let's switch to questions and answers. And Rachel's got some microphones there. So we've got about 15 minutes or so for Q&A. Any questions or arguments? Yes.
Thanks. Very good presentation. Question I have is, what do you think is the main factor that's holding our industry back right now?
I didn't quite catch the question there, sorry.
What is the main factor that is holding our industry back from automation?
I think 3 things. Certainly the pace of government regulations and the slow pace. I mean, I do understand governments have to be cautious. I think public perceptions, people are concerned about what happens. And there are still, as I mentioned earlier, some technology challenges which are still being worked on. So it all comes together. It's happening slowly in your area, off-road, shuttle buses, the early adopters. It'll take a bit of time to work through all of those. Yes?
Hi. You talked about 2 very different disruptions. The CAVs was the main focus, but you also talked about the personal transportation with using the air. Those 2 have very different implications. So by altering and adopting all the CAVs, we still need roads and bridges. The cities pretty much stay where they are. There's huge changes, but going to the air, it makes it an entirely different case for roads and bridges, as well as the location of things. Do you think those 2 technologies coexist, or does one going forward outweigh the other and perhaps overtake it?
They'll coexist. I think for the foreseeable future, let's say out to 2050, flying taxis will be a premium option. So people will use it. I mentioned Dallas-Fort Worth. I live in Ottawa. Montreal is about a 2-hour drive away, and in the future I could see Ottawa-Montreal being an option by air, like it used to be. So they will coexist. On the ground side, I see a lot of changes. One of the things I can see, for example, is these pods. I showed you that little pod from Agredo, Canada, a 4-seater. I see in the future pods like that. When you call one on your smartphone, it'll come to your door, pick you up, and then say to head downtown. And these pods will actually join together and become a road train. And so it's a far more efficient use of each lane of road. And as you get to different locations, these vehicles communicate with each other. So if your part needs to leave, the vehicles will open up, your part leaves, and they join up again. So it will be more efficient. And that's going to reduce, in part, some of the need for roads. But the biggest single thing that will reduce our need for roads will be sharing. I think most thought leaders feel that way, and you therefore need to encourage people to share more. There's far too, in every city, there's far too many, single occupant cars. So that has to change as well. Right. Anybody else? Yes, over there.
Okay, there we go.
No one.
So the engine's gone and we're all electric and everything's batteries. And have you seen any analysis on, is there enough lithium or is there enough components? I mean, if everything goes batteries, the current technology, does that need to be advanced as well?
The articles I've read, I'm not a personal expert on cyber about that aspect. What I've read is, for the foreseeable future, yes, there's lithium from South America, I think Bolivia, and certainly China's doing a lot of work in that area. So they will be, but also if you look longer term, there will be other battery technologies come along, which will help as well. I'm hearing more and more nowadays about hydrogen, and I'm no expert on that, but I'm going to be watching that very closely to see to what extent hydrogen becomes active. But these, and with anything like this, it's partly technology, it's partly marketing and politics that come into play here. A little bit of trivia. Have you ever heard of Henry Bliss? Henry Bliss, in 1899, Henry Bliss went down in history as the first person in all of North America to be killed in a traffic collision. And he was getting off a streetcar in Manhattan and got hit by an electric taxi. 120 years ago in Manhattan, there were more electric vehicles in use than internal combustion engines. And it's, to extend a bit of trivia, the people who commuted to Manhattan on the streetcars became really expert at dodging these silent electric taxis. So much so, and that when, in the early 20th century, when they got their first Major League Baseball team, they called it the Brooklyn Dodgers, in memory of all the people who had to dodge electric taxis on the streets. And so even when the team was moved to LA in the 1950s, they kept it named Dodgers in memory of the original name there. So but history is showing that even though at one stage electric vehicles were so dominant, it didn't work out that way. But I think bottom line, I think there is enough lithium from what I read, but also the technology can change over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Anybody else? Okay, yes?
You acknowledge, and I think correctly, that you're not going to eliminate collisions.
Sorry?
You acknowledge, and I think correctly, that you're not going to be able to eliminate collisions with CAV or electric cars. It's still going to happen.
Agreed.
It's interesting, there's actually a few, not many, who believe that with LiDAR and sensors and computers and what have you, that you could eliminate unscheduled downtime in our industry. Unscheduled means that it failed and you didn't anticipate it as maintenance, it just failed. What do you think about that?
No, I mean, as I said earlier, I'm an engineer. I know all hardware, all software fails occasionally, and technology is never perfect. We're well over 100 years since the first cars, since planes, we still have problems, and we're going to have those issues. And one of the questions that comes up occasionally is the connection between CAVs and the 737 MAX issues. Because the problem with the 737 MAX is an issue with testing and certification. In an industry that has traditionally been very conservative, people ask me, given what's happened with the 737, is that a concern for CAVs? How robust will the testing and certification be? And I hope we're learning from the 737, but it shows what can happen. So I'm 100% convinced we will never eliminate either collisions or outages or failures or anything. I'm too much of a realist on it. Yes? Oh, what? Sorry, Rachel, I wasn't sure you're pointing to something. Okay, Rachel's saying it's time, so it's 10 past 12, right on schedule. Right. So thank you again to Rachel and AMP for the invitation. Thank you all for coming here and staying until the bitter end. And thank you, and have a safe trip home.
Everybody, let's thank Barrie. Again, it's the end, and we want you to fill out the app and rate our speakers, please. And we hope to see everybody in March at Connect. And I'm gonna hand it off to Mason.
Again, I want to thank Barrie. Great presentation. More importantly, I want to thank all of the AEMP staff. That's Rachel, Jenny, Kim, Jackie, and Chris was here as well. The folks from the Marriott that helped out, the technician back here, thank you very much for the sound and light. And thank all of you for showing up here. We really like to make sure you sign up for Connect in Vegas just before Con Expo. And I think that's it. That's a wrap on this event. Thank you.